All right. Welcome, everyone. Want to welcome you to today's session. I was just trying to orient myself with my various screens. So welcome to today's webinar. It's our opportunity to explore person-directed leadership and what it means to create and sustain a coaching culture. A few of you have already taken the leap and gone ahead and introduce yourself in the chat box. And so I want to encourage you to take a minute to do that. It's one of the ways that we can have some interaction in sessions like this. I also want to encourage you, you'll see at the bottom, you have a button for Q&A. So as questions come up, feel free to put those in the Q&A and Carol and myself will check them as we go through today's session. I want to take a moment and have Carol introduce herself, and then I'll introduce myself, and then we'll jump in.
Hi, I'm Carol Dumont-Stryker. I'm one of the project coaches with the Greenhouse Project and have been for the last 5 years. My background is really nursing, from CNA, LPN, RN, nurse manager, ADON, and DON.
Just that.
Just that.
Yeah. And I'm Marla DeVries. I'm the Chief Learning Officer here at the Greenhouse Project. I've been with Greenhouse almost 10 years and cut my teeth in long-term care as a long-term care ombudsman here in Michigan. So here's where we're headed today. We're going to, we intentionally kept this webinar short because we wanted to meet the busy needs of those that are working in elder care. And so where we're headed is we're going to do this overview of what person-directed leadership is, what that means, and as part of that, what it means, as I mentioned earlier, to create and sustain that coaching culture. And as part of that, what it means to really have true partnerships and to be able to assess where you are as a leader in really fostering a culture that has those deep partnerships. And then finally, we want to sprinkle in some tips for implementation. So some things that you can readily do to apply the content. And we're doing that all hopefully in 45 minutes. And then we'll have the extra time till the top of the hour for some Q&A as those come up. So this comes up frequently. So we thought we'd just put a slide in here that says, yes, you will receive the slides and a recording in an email. Probably in a couple days, you'll get something from Janet. So you'll have this information. And there are a few slides that I would say are a bit content dense. And so it'll be nice for you to not have to scramble if you wanted to take notes, that you will get that content. But let's start now with kind of just very basic. If we're going to talk about person-directed leadership, let's start with what's required according to CMS. And likely for a lot of us, this is not unfamiliar. I'll read it. It says, this is how CMS defines person-centered care. To focus on the resident as the locus of control, and to support the resident in making their own choices and having control of their daily lives. So let's drill down a little further. And for many of you, this slide won't be unfamiliar either. It's that continuum of person-directed care and the progression that an organization can make from being way on the left side, you see being that provider-directed, and then transitioning to being staff-centered, to being person-centered, and then person-directed. And this continuum, if you've seen it before, but you haven't seen that citizenship aspect, it's been further expanded. And I think what's exciting is in our field, we continue to evolve, we continue to grow. And so my hope is that 5 years from now, we'll have expanded this to even another column or two to see what the next illustration of person-directed living and truly having elders in the driver's seat. So for our purposes today, we're going to focus on that person-directed column, having that locus of control when it comes to routines, preferences, looking at how work is organized, how decisions are made. And I want you to keep that in mind as we explore leadership. All right, one more kind of fundamental foundational thing. These are the values and principles of the Pioneer Network, and they might be familiar to many of you as well. And if you didn't know it, haven't heard it, the Greenhouse Project and the Pioneer Network recently formed an alliance, and we're joining forces to really impact the aging sector. And I want you to take a moment and look at these values and principles. And I'm gonna be quiet for a full 30 seconds. And I want you to just read through them and think about them in the context of leadership. So I'm going to give you just a minute to do that. All right, so typically we think about those values and principles in light of the elders and what it means for residents for their daily life. But we want to shift our attention and look at what those values and principles, how they apply to person-directed leadership. So before we go back to those principles, I want you to just take a moment, and Carol, maybe I'm going to ask that you monitor the chat. I'd love for people to write in the chat how you would describe person-directed leadership. What does that mean to you? What comes to mind when I say person-directed leadership? I'm going to give you a moment to just jot down some thoughts. You tell me if you've got something, Carol.
We're blowing up the chat. So we have being a good listener, building community, empowering others, letting other people make decisions, focusing more on people than the task, talking to the staff about initiatives, understanding each individual team member, being inclusive of all those we support, being collaborative, giving the team autonomy to do what works for them, serving others, knowing the individuals you are speaking to and catering to them. Employees know their authority, relationships.
Wow, that's like our whole presentation, Carol.
It is.
So let's jump to a poll. I think I kind of have an idea of where this is going to go.
Sure. So the first poll, the question is, which of the Pioneer Network values and principles is applicable to the role of leadership? So check all that apply. Know each person. Number 2, each person can and does make a difference. Number 3, relationship is fundamental building blocks of a transformed culture. Number 4, respond to the spirit as well as the mind and body. Number 5, put the person before a task. And number 6, promote the growth and development of all. So really, when we think about person-directed leadership, we often really think about the elders. Yet there's more than just the elders. Our goal is to have employee well-being as well. So this helps us to create that environment for every person to have high engagement, purpose, and meaning. So Janet, where are we at? Do we have some results yet? Wow, it looks like every answer scored 88% or higher. It's a beautiful thing.
Not surprising. Based on the chat, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about the Pioneer Network values and principles, there's a couple things that we can do to apply this to our work environment. So the first is really sit down with your team and ask, how are you living out those principles towards our care force? And then identify an area to focus on and improve.
All right. So we understand what the values and principles are, and I think it's a bit of that shift or that intention about thinking about them, not just for the elders, but for the team members as well. And we acknowledge that just because we want that doesn't mean there aren't any difficulties. So I'm just going to pause and give you kind of our definition, or I'll say my definition of person-directed leadership. It's focusing on the growth, the development, and the support of the care force, or what you might call the workforce. Person-directed leaders create a culture of well-being for elders and team members, including the establishment of a collaborative coaching culture in a relationship-rich environment. And we're going to dig deeper into that in a moment. But saying that, we acknowledge that there are forces working against those goals. So I want you, again, and I love that people are putting stuff in the chat, to type what makes person-directed leadership difficult. And Carol, again, I'm going to ask that you kind of monitor that.
So we have workforce, regulations.
I saw people.
Time, people, time again, knowing all the different learning styles, being busy, being fair, kind of the personalities that's mentioned. One size does not fit all. We have old habits. People are set in their ways. There's negative motivation. There's a focus on the budget, not having time for one-on-one with team members. The standards are outdated. There's this top-down culture, alignment of the workforce, different personalities, loss of control, lack of leadership buy-in, balancing the needs and goals of everyone. Tammy, I love this. COVID, hierarchy, an institutional culture, ego conflicts, values, ineffective systems, cultural blocks, too many meetings, pride, not wanting to listen. There's going back to the way we've always done it. Thank you, Joan. Mental blocks, systems management, all sorts of things are filling up the chat.
Yeah, I'm watching it scroll through. I don't know how you're being able to read through them. So a lot of things, and I'm just going to underscore a couple that have been mentioned. And you know, I think these slides are like, no kidding, right? That I'm stating the obvious of what you all have been living through. So we know what's happening in our society with the Great Resignation. And then I think if it's not the Great Resignation, it's the quiet quitting, which is kind of a newer phenomenon. And I don't know, I'd love a couple of people to type in the chat if they've seen the impact of quiet quitting in their organization. I think that it has the potential, in my opinion, to have even more dire consequences than the Great Resignation. So we've got those factors. We've got, that's more generally. So Melissa says, absolutely. So we know that the Great Resignation kind of just more globally as an issue. And then we look closer to home and we see the trend according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics specific to nursing home. And then we can also further look at the study, and we've shared this in a previous webinar, but I think it bears repeating. The data we have from the American Healthcare Association and NCAL, a survey that was conducted over a year ago but likely we'd have pretty similar responses today. That, what does it say? 99% of nursing homes and 96% of assisted living communities are facing a staffing shortage. You know this to be true. This is the current reality. I appreciate Crystal's comment. Quiet quitting is nothing new in history. So we see those impacts. So Carol, I'm going to turn it over to you. I think we've got another poll that has 2 questions.
Yes, it's a double poll. So the first question is, which factors contribute to creating the desired person-directed culture? You can select all that apply. 1 is stable leadership. 2, stable workforce. 3, sufficient resources for training. 4, organizational focus on elder well-being. And 5, organizational focus on employee well-being. And then that second question is, what do you think your greatest strengths are as an organization? So those same bullet points.
But the first one you can respond with multiple options, and the second one you have to just pick one.
Okay, Janet, are we ready to close out our double poll?
There's still a lot of answers coming in.
Okay, so we'll wait a moment. Here we go. So which factors contribute to creating the desired person-directed culture? So the ones that they all scored high. And the 2 that scored the highest was a stable leadership team and the organization's focus on employee well-being. And then, so where are our teams feeling the strongest? That's beautiful to see. 42% have a stable leadership team, especially at a time when things have been very, very difficult. Okay, thanks for sharing.
Well, and I just want to note that, so what we said was, oh, I lost the poll, but the factors that contribute the most, one of the highest one was a focus on elder well-being. And then I think it was 4%, thank you, Janet, 4% said that, well, that's an organizational strength. So not that it's not happening, but perhaps what this says is, you can close it now, Janet. Perhaps what this says is we haven't paid as much attention to it as we could to see the benefit that we're looking for in terms of person-directed leadership and having that person-directed culture. So we want person-directed environments that create well-being for elders as well as team members. And we know the current challenges that we're dealing with. So we want to look at how do we get from where we are, acknowledging the challenges, to where we want to be. And I previously shared the Pioneer Network values and principles. And what you see on the slide are the greenhouse core values that really provide a foundation for our model. And these are the basic core values, whether it's practiced in a small home environment, which is how greenhouse is probably best known, as well as a traditional nursing home or assisted living, or even in a home care environment. These core values have application. And I want us to focus most specifically on the value of empowered staff, which, given our topic, is probably not surprising. So this is how the Greenhouse Project breaks down empowered staff. And we could, Carol and I, because we do a lot of the education, we could spend hours talking about each one of these 4 bulleted items. We're going to focus our attention on the bottom bullet, which is creating a collaborative coaching culture. And so before we get into what do we mean by that, Carol, I'm hoping you can talk through the next couple slides on the data of what's possible in living out the 4 elements of empowered staff and the other core values as well.
Yeah, one of the important things to consider about the team member satisfaction and elder satisfaction is looking at turnover. And when you compare turnover for greenhouse homes to turnover from the traditional nursing homes, you'll see that there is a significantly less percentage of turnover in greenhouse homes than those traditional homes. And then the other thing is occupancy. Occupancy is so important in our business world. So when you look at the average occupancy, greenhouse homes had 13% higher occupancy in 2020 and 17% higher occupancy in 2021. So those data really make a difference for the outcomes for people's organizations.
All right, so let's drill down. And when we think about from a culture perspective, and when you think about being a leader of an organization, your focus needs to be on what kind of culture are we creating. And what we're talking about is both a collaborative culture and a coaching culture, which is why we put the two together and we say a collaborative coaching culture. So let's start with collaboration. I'm a big fan of definitions because it helps me to really understand what it is and what it looks like. So collaboration is when we work with someone, a person or a team, to produce or create something. So collaboration generally crosses departmental lines and it crosses responsibilities. And we think of it as this higher accountability. It's a higher calling, a higher expectation than what you see on the slide with cooperation. Oftentimes with collaboration, I like the idea of thinking about we're co-creating something. So when we think about cooperation is really more about that exchange of relevant information and resources to support each other's goals. So if Carol had a goal and I shared information with her, I'd be cooperating, and the same thing. I'm helping her, I'm providing information so she can meet her goals rather than us having necessarily a common goal. So then the one in the middle is teamwork. And teamwork is when there's a shared goal, but typically the focus is on that end goal and we're working together and we're part of that same team to make it happen. Collaboration is we're co-creating something and it's generally across some departmental lines or some maybe just traditional ways that we do things. And so if you look at the box on the slide, there are 4 keys to collaboration. And no matter what role you have in the organization, these 4 keys, when it comes to collaboration, are musts for growing it and becoming more and more of that person-directed leader. So that's the collaboration part of it. And then if you look at coaching, this culture of coaching that we want to create, I probably don't know a better authority to draw from when it comes to coaching than Sir John Whitmore. He is widely known as the guru of coaching, and I like how he describes it. He says coaching is unlocking people's potential to maximize their performance. It's helping them to learn rather than teaching them. Coaching focuses on future possibilities, not past mistakes. So when you think about it as a person-directed leader, think about how you go about unlocking people's potential. When we think about that employee well-being, part of that is unlocking people's potential. Another way of looking at coaching is that this is the greenhouse, how we describe the coaching approach, which is a big part of that empowered staff core value. Coaching is a relational approach of meeting people where they are and helping them grow in their problem-solving skills and interpersonal skills without telling them what to do. And so when we look at creating that coaching culture, we believe you need to address 3 components, and you see them on the screen: skill set, mindset, and culture. So we need to equip people with coaching skills. And so coaching skills are how to be curious, how to ask open-ended questions, how to listen actively, how to pay attention to your body language, how to tame your advice monster to go from a telling approach to a coaching approach. Then we need to assist people in understanding what their current beliefs or mindset is related to employee empowerment and shared decision-making and being able to lessen control. So it's having that self-awareness of, what do I think about my employees' ability to make good decisions, that they would make value-based decisions or not? And what do I believe? What do I feel when we talk about not being the primary decision maker? What does that make me feel? And having some good understanding of our own beliefs. And then finally, the culture side of it, which is what are the systems and processes that need to be in place to truly shift the culture. So this is a really content dense slide. I share it with you as an example when you look at one of those components of creating that mindset. And it looks at going from a fixed mindset, which has more of that top-down approach, which if you have that fixed mindset, it tends to lead you to want to hold on to decision-making and hold on to control, to that growth mindset, that belief in people's abilities to make good decisions, to work together, to have the capacity, and to believe that it's your responsibility to help grow them. So that's part of the mindset aspect. So 2 tips for application. Carol gave you 2. I'm going to give you 2 more. So first, reflect on decision-making within your organization and look at how are decisions, daily decisions, typically made. And you see the 3 different options there. And then identify a decision that you can shift to a more collaborative shared process, and have a team meeting and talk about what that is and how you might go about doing that. So 2 more tips. I think we've got 1 more poll, Carol, and then I'm going to fully turn it over to you.
Yes, so our final poll, the question is, please assess your organization's allocation of resources and focus on creating a collaborative coaching culture. So for your organization, creating a collaborative coaching culture is 1, a top priority; 2, one of many things that you're trying to do; 3, not an area of focus; or 4, something we'd love to do, but don't really know how to do it. And then your final is other, and you could put your answer in the chat box. So we'll give a few seconds for people to respond.
And while you're doing that, I'll give you a reminder, you can continue to put comments in the chat. And if you have questions or even comments, you can put that in the Q&A as well.
How are we doing, Janet? Wonderful. And so 12% say it's a top priority. 47% of the respondents say it's one of the many things that they're trying to do. 23% say it's not an area of focus. And 18% of respondents share that it's something we'd love to do, but don't know how. Thanks for sharing, everyone. Okay, so I'd like to share a quote with you. It says, this is from the book, The Trusted Advisor. Partnership is a vital aspect of trust, and trust is an integral part of being an effective coach. So when you think back to that arrow and line with cooperation, teamwork, and collaboration, really partnership is key to successful collaboration. So in the book, The Trusted Advisor, the authors shared some partnership traits that we as leaders need to have. And in the, I think, in the chat, we'll have Janet share a link that has the handouts on it, because that bottom page, page 1 at the bottom, it lists these partnering traits with a little bit of definition to it. So it's really a mindset of collaboration versus competition, and having all the team members have equal status rather than a higher and lower status. It's being able to lead and follow, being able to balance assertiveness and cooperation when dealing with conflict, and dealing with disagreements and missteps productively and gracefully, right? So acknowledge that something didn't go as well as it should, and then move on to the next step. It's sharing responsibility to achieve a goal and taking responsibility for your part in the partnership success or failures. So there's some things that really get in the way of being a perfect partner, right? One of those things is having a narrow view of relationship. This is on the next slide. So when you have a narrow view of relationships, it's thinking of others as adversaries or just somebody in a certain role or a means to an end, rather than thinking of people as partners or the people that you're collaborating with. A win-lose mindset, that doesn't help. It helps us to be all for one. So we're all winning this together. And then under managed self-orientation, it's really changing mindsets from it's all about me to it's all about us and getting to that bigger, better vision together. And the next is the lack of confidence. So it's really building confidence in our teams or the people we partner with and helping them be successful. And then an overdeveloped ability to criticize, right? So rather than maybe tearing people down, it's really a coach of building it. It's really a purpose, an approach of building the team members up and helping them be better and better. And that's not all the barriers. There's more.
There's more.
There's more. So a tendency to lead or follow. So a collaborative leader could be in different positions. So there'll be moments when they are the leader. And then there's other times when you have people with expertise skills on your team and you'll want to follow them. The second on this slide is a need for immediate gratification. As leaders, it can be really easy to go do that problem solving and have that behind us. But yet the ability to we need to be patient and help the team support us to get to that goal we want, and control those feelings of being upset or it's taking too long, to help the team and help them grow. So there's intolerance for ambiguity. Like we have to be comfortable of not being in control of everything and letting a process roll out organically. Being uncomfortable with conflict can get in the way too, because very often conflict can bring up new solutions or unique ways of doing things that haven't been tried before. And then finally, a limited view of problems and opportunities. So we'll identify problems as opportunities for us rather than just us, as in just solo as the leader to resolve. So on your handouts on page 2, there is a self-assessment, So you can, just for yourself, you'll see there are traits, leadership, partnership traits. So you'll score yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. So once you finish up that assessment, you'll identify what are the areas that are your strengths. So those things that you score number 4 and 5, those are your strengths. And then if you find that you're scoring yourself at a number 1 or 2, those are your possibilities for focus. So when I think about things, tips that you can, okay, well, if you go down a little bit more, Marla, after you identify some areas for growth that you'd like, this last page of the handout, it gives you ideas of things that you can do for each area that you're interested in growing. So it's a nice handy tool that you can use in your practice and resource for you and team members going forward. So when we think about some tips for application, go ahead, take that partnership self-assessment. You can share it with your team members as well, especially those ones that you partner with most. And then also there is a 2-day being a coaching leader workshop to explore the coaching mindset and learn vital coaching skills. So you're ready for application, and that will be taught by our yours truly, Marla and Anna Ortagara. That will happen on November 2nd and 9th, and there are nursing contact hours available for that. Marla, do you want to share more about that opportunity?
Sure, I'd love to. I'm super excited about it. You know, we talked about kind of broadly about those 3 components of coaching, and we've really only scratched the surface. And so I'm looking forward to having a 2-day workshop where we can really drill down, particularly related to enhancing your skill set and being able to evaluate your mindset and your beliefs. And Anna Ortagara, I think probably many on this webinar are familiar with Anna. Anna worked for many years for the Greenhouse Project, and then worked for many years for PHI, and she is deeply steeped in a coaching approach. And I would say I have learned a tremendous amount from her in terms of what it means to be a coach and to teach coaching. And this 2-day online class is, if you can say these 2 things together, online and highly interactive, that's absolutely true. It's these are practice-based sessions, and I just really I'm excited about being a part of it with Anna. So we have time for questions. Carol, I'm gonna ask if you could go into the Q&A, and I'll go in just a minute. I'm gonna roll through a few of these slides, and then I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and see if other questions come in. For those that weren't aware, I mentioned it in the beginning, but we have this alliance with the Pioneer Network, which we're happy about. And over the next coming weeks, we'll be sharing more information about what that means and some of the different initiatives that we're going to be working on. If you are going to Leading Age, please stop by our booth and join some of our team members there. We would love to connect with you. And today's webinar is part of a 3-part series. So the next one is investing in your workforce in 2023. And we're going to be focusing on one of my favorite topics, in addition to coaching, is just education in general. And so we're going to be exploring how do you create, what are the right components to create, to be a learning organization? And we don't have unlimited budgets when it comes to training and our resources around that. So how do we really maximize the resources we have? So I'm excited to be a part of that session next week. And then Alex Banco is going to be on the following week and talking about policy and offering some really practical things around policy, what it means for you and what you can do to be engaged in those conversations. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and we will go through if there are specific questions or comments that have come through.
Yeah, so Karen writes in, can you share the handouts? I was not able to find them. So at the bottom of the chat that went in at 3:31 p.m., there's a link. It was shared by the Greenhouse Project, that first link at 3:31. Well, if you click that, you'll be able to download the handouts.
I'll just mention, the other link was to register for the 2-day session in November.
Yeah, and then another question is, what's the difference between tips and not giving solutions, encouraging learning and discovery? Tips seem like soft top-down directives. Marla, do you want to respond to that?
That's a great question. I think for when we were offering a couple tips, these were our suggestions because we don't have the opportunity to have a coaching conversation with you. I think when you are engaging in coaching and you're striving for having that collaborative culture and having moving shared decision making, to having more of those hands-on care partners involved in decision making. I think it's easy to get into offering tips, which are really just veiled solutions. And so I would encourage you as part of your self-awareness to really look at do I tend to offer suggestions? And we talk about it when in our coaching classes, we talk about it, advice in coaches' clothing. So sometimes, a lot of us are familiar with open-ended curious questions, but sometimes we can take what sounds like an open and curious question, but when we unpack it, it's really about telling them what to do. So what about calling a meeting with the dietitian? So basically what I'm saying is I think you should call a meeting with the dietitian regarding this issue rather than having a curious question, which might be, so what do you see as your next step in this issue? So that's just one example. Carol, I don't know if that's where my brain went. Did you think something differently?
No, I thought the same thing. Yes. So then we have another question. It says the possibility of culture change in the for-profit home seems almost hopeless based on experience. Starting something new as an alternative, like the Greenhouse Project, allows such a change of organizational DNA. Any ideas on culture change within the for-profit home or even well-established, heavily traditioned, not-for-profit homes?
All right, you have an answer for that one?
Yeah, I think I do. Yeah, so I think you're right. Like we have spent years and years and years working in a real traditional culture with efficiency models, and the top-down approach has been present for so many years. But I would say in the last 10 years, maybe even more, Greenhouse has been working with organizations that are both for-profit and not-for-profit to change the culture in their traditional environment. And so quite honestly, probably half of the work that I do is with traditional nursing homes. Some are not-for-profit, many are for-profit. And what we're working together to do is infuse those greenhouse core values into their existing practices. So it's really cool to see the culture change that is happening. And culture doesn't change overnight. It's not a flip of a switch, but you have just this continual change over time, which makes a whole difference for the elders that live there and the team members that work there as well.
Well, and I would add to it, you shared some of the statistics in terms of occupancy and turnover. So for some organizations, a real focus on the bottom line, you can make an argument that changing our culture not only is good for the elders, the families, the team members, but it also is good for us as a business. So I think that that's, an important component of it. The other thing that I would add is it can seem overwhelming. It can seem daunting. And, we talk about, do you want to tweak or do you want to transform? And like personally, I'm like, I want to transform. I want to work with organizations that want to do that. But as the saying goes, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. And it's looking at one aspect, one portion of it, one step at a time. We use the frame. Carol, I feel like pretty much every conversation I have, I like to throw in beliefs, behaviors, and systems. So I'm gonna throw that in today. When we look at any kind of change, and oftentimes the challenge is that stickability, right? So we want change, and maybe we get some success, but then it doesn't take much to have it ebb back to the way we've always done things. And I think part of the reason is when we make a change, we look at actions or behaviors. We say we want our team members to stop doing something or start doing something. And really, when we look at successful change, we have to back up and we have to say, similar to what we talked about with coaching, with mindset, but we have to look at what's the belief that's driving whatever behavior we're seeing right now that we want to change. And what's that belief from a leader's perspective, from hands-on team members' perspective, and then what's the new belief that we need to adopt in order to embed this into our culture. And then the other side of it is, what do they say? Culture eats strategy for breakfast or something like that. So we have to acknowledge what are the current systems and processes. What do our policies say? And in the way our policies written, are they going to support this change or undermine it? And a lot of times, whether you're a for-profit, not-for-profit, if you've got systems in place, that's going to trump even the best of intentions. So we've got to look at our systems and make sure that they're fully aligned with this new culture that we're trying to create. That was a long answer.
It was a great answer. So we have another comment/question from Karen. She said, might it be worth considering the platinum rule as opposed to the golden rule? The platinum states, do unto others as they'd want done unto them. The difference between the two is interesting and requires that we trust that elders can articulate their values, how they wish to be treated, and that they know better than we do what they want and need. Emphasis on the last phrase.
Do you have a comment for that one? I was just writing a little note.
I would just say that when we go back to the greenhouse values, one of those values is meaningful life. And part of understanding meaningful life is it really goes to each individual elder, right? It's understanding what gives them purpose and meaning in their life. So I agree with this platinum rule because I'm the only one that can share what I need, and team members have to deeply know me to understand those things if I were the elder. What would you add, Marla?
Well, a couple things. I think a very basic application is, we look at birthdays. And so, one of the examples we've used in culture change for a long time is, how do you, at a nursing home, for example, celebrate birthdays? And we go from that pretty traditional thing, which is we have that monthly birthday party. And then we talk about, but that's not very person-centered. And so we move from, okay, and I worked with organizations that they made that transition and said, okay, instead of having the monthly birthday party, we're going to, on an elder's specific birthday, we're going to celebrate that person. And the kitchen is going to have a cake and we're going to have balloons. And so that's a pretty person-centered way of celebrating birthdays. And maybe it's the golden rule way, but it's not the platinum rule, because the platinum rule or the person directed would be to ask the person, how do you want your birthday to be celebrated? And for some, a cake and balloons and being the center of attention might be exactly what they want. And for others, that's not at all what they want. Second comment I'll make is, when you were reading that, I thought about the quote, and I'm not going to get this exactly right, but Atul Gawande in Being Mortal says, we want autonomy for ourselves and safety and security for those we love. And so to think about and we could talk for a long time, Carol, about surplus safety and really looking at the dignity of risk, particularly for those that can't as readily voice what their preferences are. And so knowing that understanding that our for many of us, our default is wanting to care for people. And that often means our interpretation of the golden rule instead of that platinum rule. I think that just helps us to understand the challenge and how much further we have to go. Because I agree with what Karen wrote and with what you said in terms of that feels like a more person-directed explanation. Oh, and Joan has got a comment that goes with that. Did you catch that, Carol?
That's why risk-taking is a normal part of life is my favorite Pioneer Network value.
Thanks, Joan.
Love Joan. And we have one more comment or actually series of questions in the Q&A. It says, when you say pay attention to the spirit as well as mind and body, how do you go about that? What do you mean by the spirit? How are faith communities involved? And what's the role of chaplaincy as staff?
These are some deep questions. So I can start us off. And in our training, we talk about spirituality. And I think that has different applications. So just to tag on to what we were saying about the individuality of people, it's looking at each person as a spiritual being. That doesn't mean that the practice or the faith gets expressed the same way, but it's really appreciating the spiritual component of people. So that's first of all. And then, I think in terms of person-directed care, for a lot of us, how we express our faith and our spirituality is a component of being that spiritual being. I would say, Carol, we both had an experience and are close to chaplains. And I certainly think when we think about nursing homes, they play a vital role in this. My dad was a chaplain for a nursing home for a number of years. And so I learned a lot from his experience. I know you've got good friends as well. So I think they're not in charge of the spiritual well-being. It's not just their responsibility. When we think about having a collaborative culture, it's got to extend beyond the chaplain, but they can be a really vital component of it. What would you add?
Well, I think I want to share some of the comments as well. So Laura had shared, we consider spiritual components of daily living as their definition of fulfillment. So what creates that wholeness for that person? And then Brian shares that we completely undermined person-centered care by going through the new pandemic rules. We dictated the way we needed to go through this for safety, even though many seniors didn't want to abide by them. So I like what Laura has shared about it's the definition of fulfillment, right? So we are spirit, body, and mind. And like Marla said, it's not necessary about Catholicism or different religions. It's what brings purpose, meaning, and really giving back to the world, figuring out how do we, it's kind of that top level of Maslow's hierarchy, right? It's being that whole person and meaning into the world.
Right. And just to go back to one of the pioneer principles and values, and certainly a value that we hold dear, which is to put that person before task. And oftentimes in long-term care, we get really focused on the physical aspect of people's needs, and we push the others aside. It looks like Laura referred to it as a human ecological model. I love that. So it's really helping to find that balance between mind, body, and spirit. All right.
That's the end of our questions. And Janet is going to share a quick 2-question evaluation to be done.
All right. Thanks everyone for participating, for the great questions and interaction. And we will hopefully see many of you back here next week. Thanks, Carol.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.